Could we please rise to salute the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to ask for a moment of silence. One of our members, Jeffrey Craig Paul, retired Lieutenant Colonel. I'd like to ask for a moment of silence as one of our members, Lieutenant Colonel Jeffrey Craig Paul, has died, retired U.S. Air Force veteran, very impressive resume, and he has died. So we want to certainly pause a moment to remember him. Could we have a moment of silence, please? Thank you. Before going to our treasurer's report, we're happy to report we have a brand new treasurer here, and he can talk a little bit about who he is and so on. But before I introduce Harvey, I want to say a little bit about our former treasurer, who was Randy Moore, has left us. He's now moved off Cape Cod. Randy did a great job. He was our treasurer for a number of years during some very difficult times with COVID-19 and all. So we wish Harvey and his wife the very best in their new endeavor. They're now living in a retirement home off Cape Cod. With that in mind, I'd like to introduce Harvey, our new treasurer.
Thank you very much. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. This is my first stint, so please bear with me. I will make a report, but before I do, a little bit of background. My name, as mentioned, is Harvey Beth. I moved in May from Martha's Vineyard. I left and came back to America, as the vineyards say, and I'm delighted to be here. I live in Southport, the community of Southport, and and it's a wonderful community with great activities, and I'm really pleased. And unfortunately, the one thing that you know when I moved into Southport is that I'm over 55 years of age. Okay, upon assuming my background, I was a CPA. I'm a retired CPA, and I was also a government finance officer. I spent probably 50 years working, and I spent 26 years of those in the government sector. On the vineyard, I spent a lot of time as a treasurer for 14 different not-for-profit organizations. So they heard that here at the men's club, and they said, aha, we're losing our treasurer. What can we do? Okay, I'll volunteer. So under duress, here I am. Enough about me. The treasurer's report. Okay. The interesting thing about the treasurer's report is that Randy, who did a great job, as you heard, turned it over to me on a little tiny thumb drive. He turned over $1,589.62 to me, including $17.56 in our petty cash fund. Since that time, we've collected 180 more dollars in dues. So we're now up to $1,742.18, give or take a penny or two. But that gives you an idea of how we're starting. We're starting off, and I've got a little more paperwork to catch up on. But if there's any questions, I'll entertain them. Other than that, let the show begin. Any questions? No? Okay.
Thank you. We thought that Harvey, with being a CPA, would be okay in handling about $2,000 worth of money. We have full confidence. Yeah.
I am kind of old.
You're over. Are you over 55? Okay. All right. Next is going to be a report of our secretary, Berkeley Johnson.
First of all, I think we should have a resolution approving the treasurer's report. Does somebody want to move it? Second?
All in favor? Aye. Thank you.
No tolerance of discussion. Welcome to everybody. This is,
Can't hear you. You gotta take, you gotta use that, you gotta.
they can't hear this anymore.
The microphone is for her only.
Yeah, it doesn't work in here.
Volume.
I'll try and speak louder. Welcome for the largest crowd we've had since the beginning of the pandemic, and we're on the way. This is the best meeting of the year in terms of speaker, and I don't want to tell anybody that I don't want anybody to get the impression that the others aren't first rate, because they're
We
very
won't
good.
tell the town manager, will we?
And no, he might tune in. At any rate, the first order is approval of the minutes of the prior meeting in August. They were distributed with at the newsletter. Hope everybody read them. Are there any corrections, additions, subtractions? If not, may I have a vote of approval of the minutes for August.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous.
I think it's appropriate to take 1 minute to introduce our new chairman of publicity, who's already had an article in the paper, and that's Ray Goodale, who volunteered to take on that job. The next item, Dean Turner has a report on some of the action of the executive committee.
Just a couple of comments. Dean came to our rescue, really, when we had only like 37 members, and we're very concerned about this. Matter of fact, our fine secretary even sent a notice out saying that a shot across the bow that if we didn't get some members, we were going to have to fold up camp and go away. Dean kind of got a hold of us, shook us up a little bit, and came to our rescue. We've had an executive committee meeting. We've done quite a bit of work, and Dean is going to do a report now on that event. Thank you.
I think Harvey got the dues of 7 members today, so
So we are up to what?
we're way over 40 now, so we're,
Okay,
yeah.
okay. This is deceptive because it gives me the feeling that everybody can hear way in the back, but I know better than that. Can you hear me? In the back? Okay. Yes, I don't typically stand up and read, but I want to do that to be accurate. Basically, when Berkeley's 726 newsletter warning that if we didn't receive dues from 50 members by August 2nd, we'll begin the process of terminating the men's club. As soon as I got that, as soon as I read that, I saddened, because I know everything that people have done to grow the men's club and that so many people love it. I hated to see that kind of possibility. So I sent a letter to the board suggesting that we have an emergency executive committee meeting, and we included Chuck Gazer and Russ Maloney and myself. And the purpose of the meeting was to plan to keep active, to develop a plan to keep active until the end of this year, giving us enough time to see if we had the vitality to continue to operate. Okay, during the meeting, we agreed to divide up the list of, at that time, 63 members amongst the group and to make a call. So we talked with everybody over the next 2 weeks, trying to get a sense of the interest in the club, the vitality of the club, and hopefully come up with some volunteers that are needed for the executive committee. Well, I'm going to give you a shortened version of this report. Good news and bad news. The good news is, over the next few weeks, we went from 22 paid members to 47. And how many is that now, Bert? Well, it could be over 50 now. Anyway, so that's the good news. Other good news is Harvey Beth agreed to become our treasurer. Tony Cucuzzo agreed to become our assistant treasurer, and Ray Goodale agreed to become the chairman of the committee, the publications PC committee. We also received several ideas on how to improve the club. The bad news is that no one else volunteered to fill the 4 remaining positions on the executive committee, which is assistant treasurer, 2 assistant moderators, and moderator. Other things we found from our calls is that those that paid their dues or promised to pay their dues felt that the club, they enjoyed the club immensely, the trips, the speakers, the camaraderie, and they plan on continuing. Those who missed several meetings, and this is from all the interviews, those who missed several meetings and trips said that it was due to a variety of health issues for themselves and or their spouses. And unfortunately, they saw that that might continue. Reasons given by those that will not be returning was everything from the sad death of Jeff Paul and others to ongoing health reasons, relocation to be closer to families, and shifting priorities. Now, I've agreed with Burke and Bruce that I'm going to shorten this report today, only because the total is going to be in Burke's next newsletter, okay? But from the 14 ideas to improve the men's club, I picked 4 to just mention. One of them is there was a general feeling that we really do need more active, enthusiastic members willing to lead events and join the executive committee. Secondly, we need to get out another excellent flyer and spread the 500 copies throughout the community, as we've done before. Thirdly, we need to, and Ray has already started this, we need to improve our public relations in the community. By that, we meant we wanted to have articles on speakers and trips before and after each one of them in the Mashpee and the Falmouth Enterprise. And lastly, I'll mention that we need more recruiting by current members. We're suggesting that everybody think about your friends, your neighbors, not necessarily people that live in Mashpee. Many clubs have a town title, but they accept and have members from all over the Cape. And so we're hoping that everybody will develop a list of 10 to 15 names of people in those categories and ask them to come join a meeting or a trip and give them a sense of what's going on here, which will hopefully attract some more people. So where does this all leave us as a club? After considering what we've learned from all of these interviews, phone interviews, the executive committee realizes one more time that they need a full functioning executive committee and an active committee structure to lead the group effectively into the new year. So we invite everybody, all the members here, to really dig deep and think about whether you'd be willing to serve in one of the 4 roles, either moderator, assistant secretary, or assistant moderators. And we'd like you to be in touch with the executive committee as soon as you've decided, hopefully sooner rather than later, but certainly by October 1 or our October 4th meeting. Because shortly after that meeting, the executive committee will meet once again and decide where do we go from here. So that's the essence of the report. Thank you for listening. The more details will be in the next newsletter.
Thank you, Dean.
What was the high water enrollment?
What was it ever?
Yeah.
116 members. Back about 5 years ago, before the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
So a lot of groups have lost membership. I had the benefit of talking at several men's clubs about my memoir, like the Osterville Men's Club or the Dennis Men's Club, and their membership is much larger. But I know people from several different clubs The bad news is everybody has lost members, and they've had to do a variety of things to keep membership. But groups typically are coming back now. They're starting to regain, which is what we hope is going to happen here. But the executive committee meeting, the executive committee itself needs more people to enable us to do all the things that we know need to be done to become vibrant again. Any other questions?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dean. There are a couple of other items before we.
He's going to come up. He's trying to sit by you.
Okay. There are a couple of other items before we go to our speaker. One, we hope to have a lunch for those members who want to attend at Wimpy's on the 27th of this month. That's a Tuesday, so hopefully a great number will be available. We've had them in the past. They've been a chance to socialize and consider some of these problems and otherwise talk about other things. The second is that there's a board being circulated for that, so please sign up if you can make it. Secondly, Dean has a sign-up sheet for the October trip, which is to the Massachusetts Maritime Academy, and maybe he'd say a few words, and we'll circulate that board as well.
Okay. Yeah, now for a couple of fun announcements, and that's the next two trips. On October 18th, we're going to head to Mass Maritime. They have agreed to host the Men's Club for a tour of key departments on their campus, and it's going to go from 10 to 1:30. They've agreed that the path that we'll follow, the T.S. Kennedy is in dry dock getting worked on, so it's not there. But we're going to learn about steam turbines, steam plants, turbines, and engines in their Engine Alley diesel labs. And then we're going to go to the Emergency Operations Center and learn how they're preparing for contingencies in this ever-changing world, a la Captain Phillips, et cetera, and the Somali pirates. He was a graduate in 1979, I believe. But the Somali pirating was I think it was 2000. It was 2009. He was the 1979 graduate. Anyway, other things in the changing world. And then we're going to do lunch with the cadets in their general dining hall. And then finally, the top of the tour or the trip will be going into their ABS 360 full bridge simulator. How many of you have been in that before? Yeah, this is a hoot of an experience. It's wonderful. You get to the wheel of a major container ship or a 100-foot Coast Guard cruiser under varied conditions. And they have a computer simulated lab where they have the harbors of 90 ports around the world, the exact dimensions and characteristics of harbors. And then with the computer, they ratchet up the weather conditions, and it is a riot, but it's serious training.
And you can get seasick.
And you can get seasick. It's that real. Anyway, we're going to leave. We start at 10. We're going to leave here at 9 in the parking lot and carpool over. And I hope right now we've got 4 people signed up. We have to stop at 24 because we'll have 2 groups of 12, but we could make arrangements if others signed up. Hopefully we'll get a good sign up on that. Now, Burke also mentioned that I mentioned our November trip. November 17th, we're going to go to the Coast Guard stations, Woods Hole, and tour that station as well as the Southeastern New England Command Center, including cutters. We get aboard a boat, and they either will have a live demonstration or a video demonstration of their search and rescue process, starting with receiving the distress call, and then how they deploy the various assets, not only their boats, but helicopters, how they're deployed and the search patterns that are implemented. So it's a very live, real situation, which is terrific to see happen. It gives you confidence in the Coast Guard. Finally, afterwards, we'll be doing lunch at the Landfall Restaurant, which is on the waterfront facing Hui. So again, a great day, and that's November 17th. So let me send around this one to be signed.
Dean, are these trips open to significant others?
No, wait a
They
minute.
are not, only because of the space involved in the tours. And if we get to a point where, as you know, if we get to a point where there is room, we need to get a vote of the membership in terms of whether we add spouses. But in the beginning, I think we need to leave it spouseless, just to make sure all the members get a shot. Sorry, Larry.
This will be in the newsletter when it comes out at the end of this week. Lastly, from my perspective, the senior center is installing a new system for admission to the premises, which means that our checkoff sheet is going to go by the boards. We have to deal with this out at the entry. They have a computer is going to be put in. Everybody has to have a little card that, a la the Stop and Shop or whatever, you hold it up and it clicks yes, and then you can come in and they have a record. So everybody in the club, all the members, have got to fill out one of these pages and leave it at the front desk. And let's pass them out if we got two youngsters that can.
Have you got enough?
I've got plenty there. And leave them there at the front desk. All right. On to the principal work of the meeting today. One of the most delightful meetings we have, because our speaker is Marty Sandler from Katuitt, who is quite a character. And we have not only a sense of humor, but a sense of the ridiculous, because, which is even better, my mother and I agreed. The criteria for a book he's going to write at any time is you couldn't make it up, so you know there are twists and turns that defy logic. At any rate, Marty has written any number of books. He started as a history teacher. He didn't like the textbooks that were available, so he decided to write his own. And the one coming out this year is number 66. It's called Shipwrecks, the world's greatest museum. And it will, he'll tell you a little about it, but I'm sure he'll tell you a little bit about a lot of other things too. So Marty has, one of his books was the National Book Award for the year. He's had 7 Emmy Awards. He's been nominated twice for a Pulitzer Prize.
Oh, I'd have been so handsome.
And if I pronounce it right, he's also received a Golden Cine, which would have to do with movies and things. He's authored screenplays and produced some television programs. And if he wants to talk about that, he can do that too. But Marty, we have him at least once a year, which is all that he can spare maybe in his busy schedule. But here he is, and he'll take over.
Thank you. Thank you very much. They asked me to sit down. If I need to, if you ask me, I will stand up. I can still do that, thank God. I really would like to start. This is one of my favorite places in the world, as you know, and I can't tell you, there's been at least 4 times when I've interrupted a tour somewhere else in the country because it was time to come back here, and I just love it. So you have to, now you also have to understand I have no taste, so. But there are two stories. What do you need? You want this up here? Yes. Okay, thanks. You can talk, it's all right. There are two stories I'd like to start with. I always start with stories, as you know, that are relevant. First, I am delighted for the first time to see that there are women here. I am so tired of seeing you ugly guys. This is terrific. And so I'd like to start with a story relative to that. It's about an Irish woman who was walking down the street and she inadvertently kicked a bottle and broke it, and a genie came out. And the genie said, I've been in here for 2,000 years and you've released me. You can have any one wish you want. And the woman said, what the hell kind of a genie are you? One wish. He said, that's what I can do. He said, all right, can I have one wish? I wish that you would make a bridge so long it goes all the way to Ireland so that all my brethren can go back and forth through the old sod easily. And the genie said, that's much too big a wish. I can't do that. He said, what kind of a? He said, I can't do it. Make another wish. So the woman says, okay, if I have to make another wish, I wish you'd make all the men in the world as smart as the women. And the genie says, how wide do you want that bridge? The other thing I thought that I would share with you is because of the relative age of all of us. And that is a story I heard on tour a few weeks ago. And it's about a guy who was the best golfer in this golf club. He's only 36 years old. He's not only the best golfer in the golf club, excuse me, he also is the state golf champion. And he goes to the head of the golf club and he says, I'm sorry to tell you this, but it's my eyes. I hit the ball 347 yards. It lands in the middle of the fairway. I can't find it. I'm losing strokes on great shots. Look, leave for a day. Come back. We're not going to let the best golfer we've ever had quit. Day later, he comes back and says, I told you that we'd solve it. He said, what? He said, you know Mr. Shapiro? I said, Mr. Shapiro's 92 years old. I said, that's right. But he's got 20 eyesight. He needs exercise, and he likes you. He's going to walk with you everywhere you go playing, and he's going to find every ball you hit. He says, real? All of a sudden, here comes Mr. Shapiro, shuffling up to the tee. I said, Mr. Shapiro, do you have 20/20 eyesight? He said, better. I said, oh my God, let's start. So he hits the ball, and he hits it 365 yards. He turns to Shapiro and says, Mr. Shapiro, did you see where that ball landed? Perfectly, clearly, precisely. He said, that's great. Where did it land? I can't remember. I think we can all relate to that. Yeah. It's a delight to be back here. And it's a delight still to be alive. It's a delight still to be touring, and it's a delight still to be writing. Believe it or not, I'm writing 5 books right now, which the New York Times is about to say is the most any one person ever wrote, no matter what age they were at one time. I think I've talked to you about the shipwreck book and how shipwrecks really are the world's greatest museum. One of my greatest joys is that I've just completed writing a book with my son, and it's about baseball, and it's about the year 1941, which we believe is the most amazing year that baseball has ever experienced. It's the year that Ted Williams hits 406. It's the year that even something greater happens, and that Joe DiMaggio hits in 56 straight games. It's the year that the Dodgers finally, having been so inept, the Yankees going into the 1941 World Series had won 6 of the last 8 World Series. The Dodgers had finished 6th in an 8th place in an 18 league for 12 years in a row. They were so inept, and I did pick one. It's also, what makes it wonderful, it's an age of glorious sports writing. It's the golden age of sports writing with Red Smith and Robert Kramer and all these guys. But I found one that I thought I must share with you. One of the Dodgers outfielders during the years that were losing everything was a guy named Babe Herman. And this is how it was written about Herman. The poster boy of the Dodgers' ineptitude was outfielder Babe Herman, who, for reasons known only to him, carried 2 lit cigars in his pocket. A writer for Collier's magazine gave a vivid account of Herman's fielding abilities. It was an even bet, the writer stated, that Babe would catch a ball or get killed by it. His general practice was to run up when the ball was hit, and then turn and run back, and then circle around uncertainly. All this time the ball was descending, the spectators were petrified with fear, and Mr. Herman was chewing gum unconcerned. At the proper moment he stuck out his glove. If he found the ball there, he was greatly surprised and very happy. I mean, it's great writing. Now we know I write even better than that, but still. But I digress. I'm here today to talk to you about the book that just won me the National Book Award, thank God. And it's a great honor, and I'm very lucky. And it's not so much because of my brilliant writing, it's because it's an extraordinary subject. I mean, in this particular year, 1919, women got the vote. Prohibition came in. The entire city of Boston, 65 people died when they were smothered with a 35-foot wave of molasses. The greatest sports scandal in history took place, the Black Sox Scandal. This is something we can all relate to. Hundreds of thousands of people in the United States and tens of millions around the world died, and the greatest influenza epidemic to that point, unfortunately, to that point, and on and on and on. I mean, you know, we're talking about you couldn't make it up. The thing that is extraordinary about it is that they're all related, as I will prove to this audience, and they're all relative to us today. For example, when the great molasses flood was over, and the Red Cross people, and the military people, and concerned citizens were digging through the rubble, trying desperately to find even one survivor, all the church bells were ringing in Boston in celebration. I mean, it was bizarre. And why were they ringing? Because at that same moment, women had gotten the vote. Congress had just been voted. So it's an extraordinary. I mean, please do me a favor. I'll tell you one other quick story because I can't stay up when you know that. Wherever I go to speak around the country, I speak at night to adults. But I always ask them, put me in the schools during the day so I can speak. So they bring the whole school. And they always ask, from kindergarten to high school, and they always ask me the same questions. What's it like to write a book? What's it like to be famous? And always, how old are you anyway? And so I was in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and the whole school's there, and they're all little kids, and they're all raising their hand, and they're all asking the same question, and all of a sudden, a little hand goes up from a 4th grader. So I said, yes, dear, what's your question? And she says, can you identify any recurring theme that runs throughout the body of your work? So I am saying that to you because I hope that you will ask me questions anytime. Because I would rather, as you guys know, I would much rather talk with you than at you. But to finally get started, the year 1919 starts off extraordinarily. In North End, and the North End of Boston is one of maybe the most vibrant neighborhood in all of America. It's certainly one of the real neighborhoods, still is. And it is one of the most vibrant. And one of the landmarks, besides the Old North Church and Paul Revere's house, is this enormous tank. It's a terribly built tank. It's containing, how many? I wrote it down. Containing 4 million gallons of molasses. 4 million gallons. And it's been built without a blueprint, without an architect, without an engineer. It's
Without a
just,
permit. And without a permit.
thank you very much. Exactly without a permit. I mean, the kids love it because the damn thing leaks so much that they keep going over and licking the molasses off the tank. I'm serious. And why is molasses so important? Well, there's two reasons. One, because we're a nation of drunks. And molasses, I'm going to talk about that later during Prohibition. But molasses is the key to making rum and so forth. But there's another. Anybody know what the other?
Munitions.
Oh, you guys are. I forget when I come in here that you guys are as smart as I am. Yeah. And so there's two things about to happen. This country knows that prohibition's about to be passed. And the market is going to drop for molasses totally. And secondly, World War I is ending. So there's going to be no more market for it. So they're trying to pump out as much molasses as they can. And there's a very interesting thing happens. On January 1st, the temperature is 2 degrees. Well, we're used to that. On January 15th, the temperature is 41 degrees in North Boston. Well, that's not so unusual. We've lived through that. But what it does is it causes the tank to contract and then expand, and the damn thing bursts. And this extraordinary over your head wave of molasses comes pouring down. It is just bizarre. I mean, people, when you first talk about it, start to laugh. And when they realize how many houses went, how many businesses went, how the whole elevated railroads gone down, came down, how fire stations slid into the Boston Harbor. Pretty dangerous story, but it's extraordinary. So that's how I'm having to condense everything I'm going to tell you about, or I would be here till tonight, which I don't mind, but you might. But it's extraordinary how that's how this year begins. Then, right after that, the other thing that's going on in this country, in the world, that is extraordinary, we're suddenly taking to the air. I wrote a book about called Race Through the Skies, about the first air meet in 1909, the first international air meet, in which there were 28 aviators. That's what all the aviators there were in the world. 1 year later, there were 4 of them left alive. That's what. Yeah. Well, invite me back. I'll talk about that book. But anyway, this is also a time in which, in order to sell newspapers, the newspapers around the country have found the greatest gimmick of all. And
Funnies. Comic.
oh no, that's a good guess. No, what they really found is give prizes for air accomplishments, and they mean give big prizes, so that the Daily Mail of in London gives what today would be a $2 million prize. That's a lot of money. Gives a $2 million prize for the first anybody, doesn't matter how many, can take an airplane. The first 2 men in an airplane can sail across the Atlantic. Okay? Now this is well before Lindbergh. This is in 1919. And after all of the teams apply in a screen, 3 teams are accepted. And they all head for Newfoundland, because that's going to be the closest place in America, or in the East, to sail to Ireland and go across. And again, to make a long story short, one of the teams takes off and crashes on takeoff. Second team takes off and is successful, gets over the Atlantic and crashes. In an amazing coincidence, it lands about 50 feet from the ship. So nobody dies, they pick them up. The third team is made up of 2 guys, one named John Alcock and the other John Brown. Alcock and Brown have the most amazing thing in common. They both served in the British Army in World War I, British Air Force Army, which was together. They both were captured. They both spent their entire time separately, not knowing each other, plotting how they could sail or fly across the Atlantic. And the aircraft company, one of the world's first, that employed Alcock, brought them together when they both got released, put them together, and they decided to make this run. So in 1919, in June of 1919, they're in Newfoundland. The other two teams have failed. They're the only ones left, and they take off. And I wish I had 7 hours to tell you about that flight. All I can tell you is that Alcock is the pilot. Brown is the engineer. 5 times. Now this is an open cockpit. It's freezing up there. Okay? And the wind is howling. And from the time they take off until the time they land, they've never seen the sun. They've never seen light. The clouds, they're cloud enclosed the entire time, and they're going to fly 1,700 or 800 miles. It's going to take them, how many hours did you write down? I forgot. Anyway, 160 hours, whatever it is. 5 times. 5 times. Brown, who's got a bad leg from a war injury, has to climb out on one of the wings and chip away ice. He's up, I mean, you couldn't make that up. He's up there. There's no cockpit. He's chipping away ice and trying to get direct Alcock to keep the plane level. One time, Alcock loses control, and the plane dives straight down until the nose hits the water and then bounces up. And they make it. They make it, but when they get over Ireland, he's looking for a place to land. First of all of Ireland comes out. Who the hell's ever seen an airplane before? And he's looking for a place to land, and he sees this beautiful green field. He can't believe it's there. So he puts it down. It's not a field, it's a bog. And he lays in the water like this. He makes it. And they become, again, I could take this whole day to tell you about this, but they become the 2 greatest heroes in the world at the time. I mean, they have defeated all over the world. No, and it's very interesting because they're not even the first ones in 1919 to make it across the Atlantic. There were 3 seaplanes that took off, co-sponsored by private and by the Navy, and only one of them made it. The other 2 had to put down in the water and be rescued off this stupid place called Chatham, Massachusetts. You know? So it's extraordinary. And as I brilliantly wrote in the book to end this story, around the world, Alcock and Brown were hailed as the heroes they truly were. Back in America, a 17-year-old boy told his friends that the flight had inspired him to put all his efforts into accomplishing something similar. His name was Charles Lippman. I mean, it's extraordinary. You know, these are only 2. Let me continue. It's hard to believe. It's almost impossible to believe today that a nation, particularly one as big as the United States, could say, you sell a drink, you manufacture a drink, you buy a drink, you're going to jail. I mean, can you imagine? But they did it. Now, when I first heard about it, and when I first said, boy, that's going to make the whole book particularly incredible, I realized that, wait a minute, why? How could that be? And then as I kept looking and looking, what I realized was it's very understandable that we were a nation of drunks. And we had been a nation of drunks since we've been formed. In fact, we were a nation of drunks before we were formed. And believe it or not, I know it's very hard for you who have read my books to believe somebody could write as well as me. But there are one guy named Shakespeare. Anyway, there's a guy named Dan Orcraft who I know and who writes magnificently. And when I read something that he wrote, it came to me, how could a nation pass a law like this? America historian Daniel Okrent has stated, had been awash in drink, almost from the start, wading hip deep in it, swimming in it, at various times in its history, nearly drowning in it. Arabella, the ship that brought John Winthrop and his fellow Puritans to the Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1630, that's where we're sitting, had more than 10,000 gallons of wine in its hold, along with 3 times more beer than water. By 1763, some 160 distilleries in New England alone were kept busy producing rum. And by the 1820s, there was so much liquor available in the region that it was less expensive than tea. Throughout all the colonies and most of the early United States, one of the most common drinks was hard cider made from fermented apples. I'm going to interrupt right there. When I was a kid, and when you all were kids, we went to the movies and we read books about one of our great heroes, Johnny Appleseed. He's bouncing around little old Johnny. He's making sure everybody gets apples. They're so healthy. Baloney. Nobody cared about apples. They're getting cider so they get smashed. That's exactly the way it was. As food historian Michael Pollan had written, virtually every homestead in America had an orchard from which literally thousands of gallons of cider were produced every year. By 1839, America's reliance on liquor had become such a national trait that an English visitor to America named Frederick Marriott wrote, "I am sure that Americans can fix nothing without a drink. If you meet, you drink. If you part, you drink. If you make acquaintances, you drink. If you close a bargain, you drink. They quarrel in their drink, and they make up for the drink. They drink because it is hot. They drink because it is cold. If successful in elections, they drink and rejoice. If not, they drink and swear. They begin to drink early in life, and they continue it until they soon drop into the grave." Okay? This was a terribly serious problem. I cannot tell you, as I did my research, how many hundreds of thousands of families broke up. Because men would drink at work and drink after work and come home drunk and lose their jobs and lose their families. And so the same societies that were forming, mostly by women, the same societies that were forming to battle prejudice against women were the ones that reformed these antis. The most famous woman of them all was Carrie Nation. And Carrie was great. I mean, with her tomahawk and with going in and really smashing both the bars and the guys who owned them, you know, going on stage and reenacting it. But she made her point. But there were other societies that were formed that were much more serious. And they got their way. They were able to do it. And so it gets passed. The law gets passed. Prohibition is the law of the land. That's where the story really gets good. And again, I wish I had 2 days to tell you about it. I wish I had 2 days to tell you about how religion, the number of people who joined the Catholic Church, and the number of people who joined synagogue, and the number of people who joined Protestant churches during Prohibition quadrupled, and quadrupled again. Why? Because one of the loopholes in the act was you could drink for medicinal purposes. Rabbis got rich. Priests got famous. Come to my church and I'll give you a gallon to follow. I mean, you just can't believe it. You can't believe the ways they tried to smuggle liquor in. You know, those weren't babies. Those were dolls. Hollow dolls filled with liquor being pushed through the streets. All kinds of new words came into the English language. You know, the rum runners, you know, speedboats. There wasn't such a thing as a speedboat. That wasn't the pleasure. That was a smuggle rum in. Speakeasies, you know. Women, for the first time, women are drinking in public. The drink cocktail is invented for women who are going to these speakeasies because that's where they can drink. Every home now, the stills that we laugh at in movies, when we see them in Kentucky and Louisiana, hell, they were in New York and Boston and Cape Cod, in every home you're making your own. So many people died from making it wrong. But anyway, And again, I wish I could tell you all this stuff, but the last thing I have to tell you, one of the most extraordinary characters in world history is born because of this. It's probably the most important development that came out of all of Prohibition. And that character is,
Kennedy?
what?
Kennedy?
Well, that's, we won't go into that, but you're right. No, the American gangster is born. We have no gangsters before
Same
Prohibition.
guy.
Now we got Al Capone. Now we got funerals of these guys that cost $6 million. Well, there's 5,000 cars. There, everybody's going like this. These guys have got more power than anybody, and the government can't do a thing about it. They pass the law, but they do nothing about it. They don't pass enough legislation to enforce it. So again, it's one of, at the same time, and somebody's going to have to tell me about the time, because I could go to tomorrow morning.
Or after?
No, tell me when I get too long. I mean, if I were you, I'd never get tired of me, but that's, you know the sad thing is I believe this. At the same time, one of the most important and one of the most dramatic things takes place, and that is that women get the vote. The thing, you know, our history books, not only did they tell us so many lies, you know, but they left so much stuff out. I read all about women getting the vote when I took history in the 5th grade, the 8th grade, the 11th grade in college. Nobody ever told me that years and years and years before women got the vote in America, in at least 8 states in the West, women already had the vote for years. Did anybody of you ever learn that? No. Liars. And the reason that women got the vote in the West was very simple. The men needed it. The men, one of the main reasons, part of the main reasons, the reasons given why we will never give women the vote was they're too emotional, they're too stupid, they don't contribute anything. I've got pamphlets at home that I kept and put in a book that said that women will faint when they get into the ballot, go up to the ballot, they will not be able to handle it. But why in the Midwest? Because in the West, they've rolled up their sleeves and they're in the fields with them next to the men. In fact, what has happened so often, after they're long enough, they're ruling the men. They're telling them what to do. It's true. It's really true. I mean, it's been true throughout history. I mean, the reason that for the putting thousands and thousands and thousands of Japanese Americans into prison or into concentration camps during World War II is because it wasn't just prejudice. It was that once they were in the West, they started proving that they could out-farm, they could outthink, they could out all the whites, and the whites had to get rid of them because they were getting killed by them, physically. So anyway, the other thing that when I read about this, I read about Susan B. Anthony and all of them. That wasn't the leader. The leader was somebody that most of us have never heard of. Her name was Alice Paul. And she had been in England, and she had been part of the suffragette movement in England. And she came to America and she said to the people, it's not going to work. What we're doing is not going to work unless we get aggressive, unless we do stuff that has never been done before. There were 2 things that she led. One, she led the largest protest parades in the history, in American history. Tens and tens and tens of thousands marched, organized into nurses, into teachers, into every group you could ever think of. Staged a parade in 1913 that marched the entire length of Washington. But it wasn't the parade, what it turns out. It wasn't the parade itself, it's amazing, that did the job. What it was the thousands of men who left the sidewalk and started beating these women up. Because nobody else in the nation knew that stuff like this was going on. The next thing she did was she organized 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week picketing of the White House. Oh my God, the White House. No one dared picket the White House. And so what happened then? Men started beating up the women picketing the White House. And finally the women started to go on hunger strikes. And so they started feeding them through their nostrils, and some of them died. And finally they started taking train rides, and men jumped on the trains and started pulling them off. And finally the country got the message. And that's what gave women the vote. And that's the Martin Sandler theory, and that's the heresy that's in this book. There were lots of other reasons, of course, but that's really what did it. It was when the whole nation not only heard about it, and became aware of it, but became outraged by it, thank God, that it was passed. And, you know, it's another thing that happens. So now, so that I don't go to 2 o'clock this morning, let me tell you about some of the other things that happened. In 1918, in a country called Russia, a thing called the Bolshevik Revolution took place. By 1919, you have no idea how many people in this country were absolutely convinced the next place these commies were coming was the United States. They're going to take over the United States. This is the first Red Scare. This is the whole predecessor to Joe McCarthy, who we all lived through. And there is a Joe McCarthy around. There's a guy named A. Mitchell Palmer, who even does. You're naughty, you know about him. He starts forming raids. He starts arresting people without any evidence of anything, in particular if they're foreign. Some of the most terrible things happened out on Castle Island in Boston Harbor. That's where they took the people from New England, who they arrested, who could hardly speak English at all, and threw them out in prison, just shut the doors, forget about it. It's a black mark on America. We've had a few black marks, but it takes place in 1919, and yet it's only one of so many things. There are more lynchings of black people in 1919 than in all the other years in American history combined. And there were a lot in the other years. If you were a black man and you walked down the street and a white woman was coming down the street and you didn't get off and get into the gutter, you were lynched. If you were a soldier and you were black and you were still wearing your uniform, you were lynched. If you did not say, "Good day, sir, what can I do for you?" you were lynched. I mean, it is, and then there are 3 riots that take place in 1919 that are amazing. The first one takes place in Chicago. I'll condense this, but what happens is it's a public beach, public swimming beach. And there's a huge rope that goes down the beach, sand, and out through the water. And the blacks have to swim there, and the whites have to swim. And there's a 14-year-old kid, and he's swimming. And the tide takes him under the rope. So the whites on the beach start stoning him. And one of the rocks hits him in the temple, he drowns. The police are called. They arrest 200 people, all white. All black. They don't arrest any white guy. The black guy's lying dead. The whites have done nothing except stone him to death, and they're the ones who get arrested. That's what happens in Chicago. But that sets off street riots that go for days and days. In a place called Elaine, Arkansas, a group of shareholders, and shareholders are no different than slaves, they decide they're going to unionize. And so the whites in Elaine, Arkansas, organize thugs from Mississippi and Alabama and blah, blah. And they come up and they start beating the hell out of all of these blacks. And that starts days. When it goes to court, the blacks are found guilty, of course. In Washington, D.C., something takes place that is amazing. It truly is. It's never been written up enough. It's one of the most transformative things in our history. In Washington, D.C., when the whites start beating blacks, the blacks, for the first time in history, fight back. For the first time in history, they start organizing and fighting back against the whites. They start organizing meetings about what are we going to do. It's the beginning of the civil rights So one can really honestly say that in 1919, you get not only these extraordinary, but included in all this is the first movement of blacks organizing to say, we won't take this anymore. It's an extraordinary movement. In 1919, soldiers in Fort Devens, Massachusetts, start feeling sick. And it looks like they got the flu. And 2 days after they get the flu, they start dropping dead. Meanwhile, 2 weeks before that, a whole battalion has been sent overseas. Not only do they start dropping dead, but everybody they've come in contact with in France starts dropping dead. And it's the beginning of the flu epidemic of 1918 and 1919. 650,000 Americans in 1919 alone died. And that's not as bad as it was in 1980. The thing that's incredible, everything's incredible, the thing that's really incredible about the 1918-19 and the 1919 flu is that nobody has any idea what it's all about. Nobody. There is no promise of a vaccine. I mean, can you imagine, would any of us be sitting here? Would any of us be alive, maybe, if we hadn't come up with a thank God for science. Thank God for our heroes, because they are our true heroes. I've had 5 shots already. It's the only thing that's keeping me alive. I'm serious. No, I like good looks. But other than that, you know, I just got the latest one 2 days ago. I
So
mean,
did I, yes.
yeah.
My arm still feels it, yes.
Yes, isn't that great? I mean, thank
Yes.
God. Now they tell me I need one against monkeypox. They gotta change that name. But anyway.
We're not in danger of that.
I know. Besides, I'm gonna die of old age first anyway. Anyway, what's that? That you, the treasurer?
Yes.
Oh. All right, get rid of him.
Yeah,
I don't care if he can count. Anyway, the scene in America in 1919. First of all, I don't understand why, but the mask wouldn't work. Everybody wore masks, but it didn't help at all. Every family was touched by it. What is that? No, that's all right. You don't bother me. Oh, what? I don't like that.
She doesn't know how to spell it.
What?
He doesn't know
No,
how
but
to
it
spell
said
it.
it's an emergency. Yeah, I hate that. Anyway, take 2 and call us in the morning. Anyway, every single home had markings on the door, don't come near here. The thing is, to me, again, I wish I had more time to tell you. Well, you know what? Buy the damn book. And read all of it. The thing that's most amazing to me about this influenza of 1919, one day it started, and then one day, at its peak, it ended. No vaccine, to this day, nobody knows why it ended. Nobody knows what caused it either, but nobody knows. One day they were dropping like flies, and what happened there is you didn't start to get sick, and then you hoped that you wouldn't die, and maybe you went to the hospital. You dropped dead. You were walking down the street, and suddenly, boom, you dropped dead. I mean, that was amazing. And suddenly, on one day in 1919, nobody got sick again, ever, from that particular strain. And to this day, we don't know. And boy, have they studied it, they tried to figure out, and they haven't. But it's all in this same year. And I got more, but I gotta get out of here, I'm sure, for your sake. But the thing is that it's in 1919 that the Chicago White Sox are gonna play the Cincinnati Reds. Cincinnati Reds are one of the best baseball teams in history. The Chicago White Sox are one of the best baseball teams in history. Cincinnati Reds kind of stink. You know?
Unless you're from Cincinnati.
Huh? Unless you're from Cincinnati. It's, what was I just talking? I gave a speech last night. Oh yeah, I was talking about. I gave a book on my new talk on my new baseball book. Okay, and one of the things that's amazing is all of these things that happened in 1941, which are extraordinary, take place against a backdrop of the nation going to war and baseball players becoming soldiers. And the first player to be drafted is a guy named Hugh Mulcahy of the Philadelphia Phillies. But he had a nickname. He was known as Hugh Losing Pitcher. Mulcahy. And in 1938, he lost 20 games. In 1940, he lost 22 games. He lost one more. He could have pitched for the Red Sox. But anyway, but it's just amazing. The Cincinnati Reds were like 100 to 1. The Chicago White Sox were 100 to 1 favorites. And these guys conspired to this. They never were found guilty. They were brought to trial, and a new commissioner was brought in who, when he saw that they were going to be found innocent, he was brought in to throw them out of baseball no matter what the verdict. But it included shooting, and one of the most famous sayings in all of sports, when this kid really did, when they were come up and say to Joe Jackson, say it ain't so, Joe. But the thing that is, to me, is the most important thing about all of that is how interconnected all this is. The same gangsters who ran Prohibition were the same people, just my luck, they were all Jewish. But anyway, the same gangsters who ran Prohibition were the same guys who funded that the Black Sox scandal, who paid it off. It really did happen. But anyway,
That was Chicago, that's why.
yeah.
It was Chicago.
Yeah.
Chicago had they had the
Yeah.
racketeers,
Good
and
for
they
you.
had the baseball team at the
And
same
you,
time.
well, and you had to be there because it was extraordinary. And Capone's influence. Capone's influence was everywhere. So you had that, but to me, if I'm gonna wind this up, let me wind it up this way. Because there's other stuff. Buy the book. I'll go to the library. Anyway. The thing that is amazing is that I started out by saying, when I was talking about prohibition, how can the government tell you cannot, order you not to drink, or not to buy liquor? Well, all right, how can the government, if you're a young, not even a young, how can the government say, it's the law, you wear a damn helmet when you get on that motorcycle or you're going to jail? Can the government do that? Right? How about this one? Can the government, I'm trying to think of a couple of, I'm building to something, so I'm trying to think of something else. How can the government say you gotta, what else? But how the hell can the United States government, not that I feel this way, but how can the United States government say to you, you get vaccinated? You get, wow. Really, and that is some big move. Now, when I read about these idiots who won't get vaccinated, excuse me, when I read about Djokovic, who I hate anyway, but when I hear about or the Red Sox players who can't go because they won't get vaccinated, not only are they going to kill themselves, they're going to kill them. But on the other hand, it's the old battle between personal liberty and the public good. And that's something we have never, ever been able to solve. It's only going to get worse, and we're right in the middle of it right now. Because, can the government tell you you have to wear a helmet? Can the government tell you have to get vaccinated? So for me, it was a joy writing this book because, every time I go into doing the book, it's a question, what kind of stories am I going to find? Please, God, make them be really great. A long time ago, I learned it doesn't pay to make them up. Secondly, also, please make it so that there's a lesson in that, so it means something. Because that's what I'm trying to do. And as I think I've told this group before, when they're taking me in the big box to whatever cemetery they're going. I promise you, just as they're lowering it, I'm gonna raise that box and a lid, and I'm gonna say, I got one more paragraph.